but I felt like these beings were around me, and they were like um, so grateful to see me. I've always felt like an outsider to society. I didn't fit in with clubs, with groups. I have just not ever fit in well. I don't know what the issue is. And even like little social groups, and I don't know. In this experience, it really was like they were all around me. It's like my tribe swooped in and said, in the most motherly, maternal, gentle voices, "Here you are. We're so happy you're home. We're so glad to see you. I know this was a hard one for you, but it's over and you're home."
My guest today is Rosemary Thornton, who had a tragedy in her life and then later on had some health issues that led to a near death experience. And so today we're going to learn about that. And then we're going to dive in as usual. And I'm going to ask her lots of questions. So, Rosemary, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so happy you're here.
Thank you.
So, why don't we start just really briefly about what your life was like before your near death experience?
Pretty messy. I was trying to crawl out of the pit of hell created by my husband's suicide. I had actually put in my wedding vows that he was not only the love of my life, but the answer to a lifetime of prayers, because I wanted everyone to know my prayers had been answered in finding this man. So about 10 years after we'd been married, he ended his life at our home, and it was very say it was unexpected is an understatement. Uh, and I was devastated. I've always been a very sensitive soul. What is the Myers-Briggs thing? INFJ. We're the rare ones, but we're empathic, we're sensitive, we rely heavily on our intuitive feelings. So this was absolutely devastating to me. I just couldn't understand how he could do this. So I adopted this practice of asking three things of God daily. And one was, heal me or let me go. This was too much grief for me to bear. Secondly, I asked no more hard decisions. Because of many legal matters, I had had to make an array of very difficult decisions, and it was excruciating. I suffered terrible decision fatigue. And three was, I asked when I die, and I knew it wouldn't be long. I asked for no life review because I had seen myself after his death as a mess, and I mean a mess. And I didn't ever want to see that again. I knew how jacked up my life had become because prior to this, I had written 9 books. I'd had some nominal success as an author. And by success as an author, I mean the world liked my books. I didn't make any money. Writers are the original starving artist. But anyway, I didn't make any money, but I had a good time. And, I was on PBS History Detectives and CBS Sunday Morning News and, some nice big shows with my books on architectural history. So that was pretty cool. And he was a professional. So people thought this was cool that the writer and the snazzy smart dude got together and were kind of an interesting couple. So all that went away. One of the things that happens when a woman loses her husband is it's a dramatic shift in her position in society, income, connections, all of that. And that certainly happened to me. And I also lost my mind. I kind of went nuts. I had, I guess, what the world would call a psychotic break or breakdown. And I was not able to care for myself. And for a time, I just decided I'd be most comfortable living out of my car. It was very comfortable. And I, my home is where my husband did this. I certainly couldn't go back to that. And when I was a guest in other people's homes, I was very disruptive to the household. I would wake up every night screaming, lots of nightmares, etc. So I decided the car was very comfortable. And it was a nice car. It was a Camry with heated seats and a sunroof and, nice JBL sound system and everything else. It's a really good car. Uh, I was very comfortable there. And then my friend found out that I was doing that. And she said, no, you're not going to be sleeping in your car. And I said, her name was Tracy. I said, Tracy, the woman you knew is dead and gone. Rosemary died with my husband. He's gone, I'm gone. And she said, no, it's on my heart. God has put it on my heart to take you in. And I lived with her for 4 months, and she took care of me just as a mother would take care of a very needy child. And I think about that a lot when I see when I see homeless people now. I usually just cry. And this what's funny, a lot of stuff doesn't make me cry. It's funny what gets to me these days. But when I see a homeless person, it hurts so bad because I think that's that's supposed to be me. I was supposed to be homeless, but somebody who loved me stepped in and said, we're not doing this. And I don't know. And so I think about the podcast, and I mean, it's been heard by millions, and I get a lot of emails how people say my story helped them. And I think there's two people that saved me, and one is identified in the book as Effie, and that was a male friend who just also became a caregiver. But if I've really done anything for the world or to help ease people's burdens just 1/100th of 1%, it's Tracy and my friend who get the credit because I wanted to be dead. I wanted out. And I had planned my own demise so many times in so many ways. And one of the things that consistently stopped me was one, I knew it would do to those who loved me. And secondly, I thought these two people have put so much energy, effort, time, love, and prayer into saving me. What a slap in the face that would be to them to take myself out. So, but yeah, when I see homeless people, there was one that I saw outside of a church just a few months ago, and everyone's going into church for a special event, and it's a great big cathedral in the Midwest, and everyone's filing in. And I walked right past this woman about my age who had a sign up begging for money, asking for money, and afterwards I couldn't stop thinking about it. I walked back outside and I said, "My name's Rose. What's your name?" And I don't remember her name. It was something like Chris. I said, "Chris, how'd you end up out here today? What's going on?" And she said, nobody understands, but my son killed himself and I can't function anymore. I can't face life. She said, I had a beautiful home in the suburbs. I had a BMW. I had a good life. I had a job. I had it all, and I've lost it and I can't get back. I can't function anymore with life. I just can't deal with it. And I said, I understand better than you think. And we ended up talking for maybe 15 minutes or so. And I gave her a tiny, tiny little bit of money. And and I did go back in the church and prayed for her. But I wonder how many homeless people, because I've talked to several, not tremendous number, how many homeless people have lost somebody to suicide and it broke them. These people say that which does not kill us makes us stronger. No, there's this in between space of people who have so many burdens put on their back that their knees buckle and they go down. And I wish people would stop with some of these stupid cliches. It's not fair because there are people who get broken by life. I
Yeah.
talked to a woman the other day who lost two children to suicide. Some people just break from the stress. And if you're not one of them, super duper, but don't impose your own beliefs or whatever on somebody else. So yeah, again, I went down a funny little bunny trail, but homeless people, I suspect, I don't know. What is it? A disproportionate number of them are veterans. And I also wonder how many of them are people who have survived the suicide of a close loved one. And I bet that number is pretty high.
That's an interesting
And it would
thought.
have been me. That's what gets me.
Yeah.
I was married to this successful man. It would have been me if my friend Tracy hadn't intervened. And the thing is, when Tracy said, come live with me, I said, oh no, that ain't happening. And she did her I'm the mother and that's that voice. And then she said, you get in your car and you follow me. And if you stop following me, I'm going to follow you. So I wish the world was full of people like that.
Well, it's amazing that you have somebody like that in your life. So I'm sorry, that was a lot, but when it rains, it pours because after that, then your health started to fail. So do you want to talk about what led up to the NDE?
Well, it turns out when you pray every night for God to let you die or to heal you, that sometimes, I really believe I'm a big believer in spiritual healing. And I'm a big believer that uh, I know diet is important, but I think what's more important is what we feed our mind. I think we have to be real careful about what we're thinking. I mean, if you wish for death, somebody did a survey, and some significant percentage, it might have been Bernie Siegel, who wrote Love, Medicine, and Miracles, but it was something like 80% of people who received a terminal cancer diagnosis had thought about suicide in the year before. And it's like we've got all these cells that are saying, the white blood cells are the little warriors that say, that's a germ, or this bad thing's happening. Stop.
Well, I was a pharmaceutical sales rep for Pfizer for 7 years, and the first drug I ever sold was an antibiotic. And if you looked at the studies over time, guess what increased? The placebo effect. And it had to be the placebo effect because our minds are so powerful that people taking the placebo often felt like they were getting the real treatment. And so the drug is trying to consistently beat the placebo effect as we get smarter and stronger and more believing in our thoughts. So you are absolutely correct. There's science behind that for sure.
Yeah, well, and so when I was praying every night that God would heal me or let me die, I think my body's saying we ought to fight this off, but she's saying shut it down, boys, let it in, So yeah, I got sick. I had a lot of very, very disturbing symptoms. Went to a doctor, got sent to another doctor. He, upon visual exam, diagnosed me with cancer, and they did an operation related to the disease, and it was in that operation that something went awry. And when I woke up in recovery, I told them I'm bleeding profusely. It was a gynecological biopsy. I told them I was bleeding profusely, and they said, "Oh, once you get home and lie down, you'll be fine." Oops. So I did go home and I did lie down, but I wasn't fine. It's kind of funny. I had this beautiful house. I mean, it was a nice little 1970s brick ranch, but it had new carpet in it. And I've always had a thing for white carpet. And when I bought the house, it had the white carpet. And so I'm bleeding out. I'm thinking, I'm really worried about messing up this carpet. So I'm just going to go stand in the shower, because when you're bleeding to death, housekeeping is the most important thing. So I did. I stood in the shower so I wouldn't mess up my carpet. And in the shower, I realized I actually thought about the Bible verse, 1 Corinthians 10:13, which says, God will show you a way out. God will not give you more to bear than you are able, and God will show you an escape or the way out. And I thought, this is it. This is God's mercy. I'm not doing this to myself. I went in for surgery to save my life, and this is my way out. And all I got to do is lean against this shower. Well, actually, I decided all I had to do was sit on the shower floor, and this would all be over pretty soon. And I knew I was already getting a little woozy in the head from all the blood loss. And once I sit down, I'll be gone. And I really thought about that. And I thought, yeah, this would be great. I can get out of here. And then I thought about two people in my living room. Again, one was the friend who had taken care of me, and another was somebody who'd been praying so faithfully for me. And I thought, oh, golly, this is not really fair to them that they come to check on me in 3 or 4 minutes or 6 minutes or whatever. And there I am splayed on the shower floor in a mess. So I thought, oh, I guess I can't do that to them. So I went out into the living room, wrapped a towel around myself, went out to the living room, and an ambulance was summoned, took me to the little ER nearby. And at the ER, they did some more stuff to make sure they greased the skids to the afterlife for me. And they made some pretty big boo-boos.
I am laughing.
It's like, she's not dead yet.
That's hilarious. Grease the skid to the afterlife. That's probably the best.
They did. They did. I was bleeding out. And I mean, God bless them. I really do believe. One of the big questions I get, did you sue them? No, 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 no. Suing somebody is declaring war on another human being. And, nobody tried to do this. And I really do believe it was a divinely authorized event. I really do. So, we get into all this human machinations of this happened and this happened, but I really think it was God saying, yeah, this one's pretty screwed up. Let's bring her in for some repairs. So actually, they gave me a shot of morphine, which it turns out if somebody has plunging blood pressure from bleeding out, that's a really bad idea. And what it did was, my little heart's going kaboom, 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 trying to keep beating with very little blood. And I don't know, I think once that morphine hit my heart was like, what? So my heart stopped. And I mean, I didn't know it at the time. I just lost consciousness. And I learned later that my friend, again, one of my friends was in the little cubicle there in the ER. And he said my blood pressure went to 32/25. They had one of those machines monitoring me. And he said, after it went to 32/25, he said he jumped up to go get the nurse. And he said, my eyes popped open. And he said, I reached up, tried to sit up on the gurney. And there's a term for this, terminal lucidity, where you get a burst of energy at the very end. He said, you tried to sit up on the tree, but you raised your hands up and wiggled your fingers, almost like somebody reaching for a parent, a child reaching for a parent. And he said, after that, you flop back down on the gurney. And he said, and then the blood pressure cuff went to error, which meant it was lower than 32 over 25. So it was all pretty dramatic. But I had the time of my life. I mean, I popped out of my body like toast out of a toaster. It was great. Catapulted. That's the only word that describes it. Catapulted. And having read about NDEs my entire life, I was like, this is great. This is super. Because, you know, that whole thing, heal me or let me die. I'm like, I am out. And I mean, those were my dominant thoughts was, I am out of here. This, you know, I even went to an ER to get some help. And they helped me along. So nobody can say I did this to myself. And, you know, even as I'm floating further and further away from my body, I was very aware of the pain caused by my husband's suicide. And I thought, I didn't do this to myself, but I am out of here. And I remember thinking, seriously thinking, it felt like I'd been given early release for good behavior. It really did. 59 years old, and I am gone. And all my life, or not all my life, I guess 30, 40 years, I kept a daily gratitude list. You know, every morning I write down 5 things for which I'm grateful. Again, trying to reorient my mind to focusing on the good. And even floating away from my body, I kept thinking, I'm so grateful it's over. I'm so grateful I don't have to worry about paying those bills that were piling up on my desk. I'm so grateful I don't have to worry about chemo or radiation. I'm just so grateful this is over. But yeah, I do remember thinking about my bills and thinking, not my problem. It was great.
So your human mind is still intact as you're leaving your body. And then what happens?
Well, that's the thing. I wouldn't even think of it. I guess mind is the right word, but I wouldn't think of it as a human mind. I think of it as consciousness. You know, Larry Dawsey calls it non-local consciousness, a consciousness that is not tangled up in the body. And I mean, I've thought about that a lot. What is it that went on? And I guess the best word we can use in our limited vocabulary is soul or consciousness. But one of the lovely things that happened was I remember thinking one of my very first thoughts was, I'm dying. And having, you know, my whole life, I'd read all these NDE accounts and I knew exactly what was happening. And I'm floating away in this blackness. And I thought, I'm dying. And then I instantly corrected myself. And I'm speaking out loud. And I thought, actually, you're not dying. You're dead. And it cracked me up. And I laughed out loud. And I sounded, I mean, being a quirky, eccentric, half a bubble off plum writer, I talked to myself a lot, you know. And I'd been alone for a couple of years at this. Well, I'd been unmarried a couple of years, widowed a couple of years. But I heard my voice. And I thought, I don't have breath sounds. I'm pretty sure I don't have vocal cords or lungs or the other things with which we make and produce sound. I thought, but I'm still me. And it was so comforting. Every single thing I am, down to my maudlin sense of humor, went with me. And I was so comforted by that. And I do very clearly remember thinking, what exactly did I leave behind on that gurney? And I thought, the guilt, the regret, the woes, the worries, the anxiety, the upset, everything dark stayed behind. And what came with me was the real me. And I remember thinking, I've always wondered what I would look like without any anxiety or worry or fear about the future, any of the rest of it. I thought, this is great. This is wonderful. And this experience just went on and on and on and on and on. You know, if somebody had said to me, you were dead for 6 hours, I would have been like, maybe longer. Yeah. And in reality, I was dead more than 10 minutes. But what is time? You know, I quote this a lot, but Einstein said time is an illusion. And we get into this whole thing that time is linear, that we have the past and then the present, and then off in the front we have the future. But Einstein's saying that's the illusion. We don't, and what is, you know, time is how
Persistent,
we
right? A
measure,
very persistent illusion.
right? Time is an illusion. So what was it? To those of us who are committed physicists, the past, present, and future are only illusion, however persistent. That's his quote. But what is time but how many times the earth spins around the sun? And if you're not on the earth, what's time? So it did feel like it went on for hours and hours and hours. It really did.
Well,
And
I'm
it didn't, I
excited to
don't think.
hear a little bit more detail about what exactly happened to you in those hours and hours and hours. And I want to ask you a question too. Did you ever take a look with your, however your eyes are in that place and see what your body, your vessel looked like at that point in time?
I am so disappointed that I did not. When I was in the blackness, I couldn't see anything because early on in the experience, I was accompanied by a massive spiritual being. And I mean, I felt him just come, he, she, come join me in a, I don't know if I felt the presence join me or if I just became aware of a presence with me. But I looked up and to my left to see who had joined me. And even as I'm doing this, I thought, I have a left shoulder that I'm looking over. I thought, how cool is that? And I have a head and a neck. I'm doing this. Oh, pretty cool. But I turned to look and I can't see because I'm floating in this perfect blackness. And by the way, the blackness was actively comforting me. It was like actively producing peace. But I said, and who are you? And the answer, before I could even finish the question, the answer was, you are the image and likeness. I'm the original. And I was like, wow. Wow. And it didn't just come with the words, but it came with an understanding as well. And the understanding was, I'm just, like a picture. Like that famous picture, This Is Not a Cigar. Have you ever seen that?
I
It's
don't
it's
think
this little
so.
mind bending. Oh, it's just really cool. It's just this picture of a cigar and it says, This is not a cigar. And what it is, it's a picture of a cigar. So it's technically not a cigar. It's the image and likeness of a cigar. So this is Genesis 1:26. We're made in the image and likeness of God, but I had really, really worked to understand that throughout much of my life. But now I got it. We're the image and likeness. And for us to be the image and likeness, there has to be an original. And I just, there's not a day in my life goes by that I don't think about the depths of what that means. It means a lot. So it seemed like that was an experience that happened pretty quickly. And then as I'm floating, still floating in this perfect blackness, and the thing is, I'm classic type A. I want to know where we're going. But in this blackness, I was just like, I don't know where we're going, but I know it's going to be great. I have never had so much trust in my life, but I just felt so calm. I felt like everything was going to be okay. And I was greeted, and again, still in this blackness, but I felt like these beings were around me and they were like, um, so grateful to see me. I've said this in other podcasts, but it's very, very accurate. I've always felt like an outsider to society. I didn't fit in with clubs, with groups. I had a job in corporate America for about 7 days, and I got I worked in a secretarial pool, if anyone can remember what those were, where it was not unlike that show, Mad Men. I was just one of many typists, and we'd sit there and type, 75 words a minute. And the women decided they didn't like me and they turned on me, and I got fired. They told a lie about me. They told a lie about something I had done. And I went to my boss and I said, this is not accurate. I would never do anything like that. And he said, am I going to believe three women or am I going to believe you? I said, well, I guess that's your choice. And I lost that job, and I have just not ever fit in well. I don't know what the issue is. And even like little social groups, and I don't know.
I don't
But
get it
in
because
this,
I find you to be funny, intelligent, articulate, and just like a lovely person.
oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I'll probably write that down too.
Oh,
But
good.
in this experience, it really was like they were all around me. It's like my tribe swooped in and said, in the most motherly, maternal, gentle voices, here you are. We're so happy you're home. We're so glad to see you. I know this was a hard one for you, but it's over and you're home. And I was like, yeah, I am. Why couldn't I hear from you people more distinctly when I was back in that 59 years of difficult experience? And I still don't know, but I've said this, if if the whole thing could be summed up in 3 words, it would be feeling like I was greeted with the words, "Welcome home, dearie." That's really what it felt like. And and then at one point I realized, floating away in this blackness, I was like, oh, I've been here before. Like in my 59 years of life, this is very familiar, this floating in the blackness. And again, before I could even finish asking that question, the answer was immediate. As an infant, I had been given up for dead and came back to life. And my mother didn't tell me that story until I was in my 30s. And the angels told me, they said, yeah, you know that story your mom told you? You kind of crossed over and we sent you back then. So that's why you've always been a little bit different. And that's why you've never fit in. And that's why you see things other people don't see. And that's why you were fascinated and read every NDE book you could get your hands on, starting with, what was it, 76 and Life After Life with Raymond Moody. I wore that little paperback out, reading it over and over again. So that, and I remember thinking that would have been good to know back there. But hey, thanks for the info. What's next? But I do remember thinking about the Bible verse, the peace that passeth all understanding. And I thought, Paul wrote that. And I thought, that's what he's describing, is this, the peace that passeth all understanding. I've never known peace like this. You know, we think of peace as like a noun. But in this instance, peace was a verb. Peace was actively happening. It was like a peace factory, just producing tremendous amounts of peace that every part of me was absorbing and enjoying and just frolicking in. It was great. And I really did feel like my consciousness, my intellect, whatever, got supercharged, got ramped way up. It was profound. It was just profound. And at some point, I was no longer floating away from my body, but I was standing on my own 2 feet in a white room. And I'm so disappointed in myself that I didn't look down at my feet. But I remember thinking, was floating in blackness. Now I'm standing on my own 2 feet in a white room. But I saw a white door in front of me, about, I'd guesstimate, maybe 15 feet in front of me. And I remember thinking, I know what that door is. That door is the line of demarcation, the point of no return. That is crossing the Rubicon. And I kind of said, okay, everybody out of my way. We're doing the door. I know what the door means. I'm out of here. And I remember thinking, I don't know how this new body thing, physicality works, but I know I can move with intention. Actually, what I thought was, I can perambulate with intention toward that door. Because I didn't know if I was walking or what. So I did. And as I did this, there was this mist, like a fog around me. The whole room was foggy. The room was perfectly white, perfectly, perfectly white. But there was this fog all around me and kind of swirling around my body. And I felt like I should be able to focus on an individual droplet of that mist. And next time you're in a fog, think about looking at a droplet and trying to focus on it. And I couldn't. And I asked the spiritual being or angel that was with me, I said, why can't I focus on a droplet? And she said, it's not a vapor. This isn't humidity. These are particles of light, and you're being cleansed and washed. That sometimes people come to heaven with such a disease process imprinted on their consciousness that they think it's part of their identity. Or maybe a mental illness has been with them so long they think it's part of their essence. And she said, it's akin, I don't think these were her words, but it's akin to a spiritual car wash, where all the muck of the earth is washed off of us. Other people's opinions, other people's conversations about us that echo, sickness, mental illness, anything. And that we go into heaven purified. As a friend of mine said, that was a great quote. She said, leave your muddy boots at the door. So I thought that was great. And the other thing that happened in this experience is somewhere, and I don't even know the mechanism by which this was communicated, but somewhere in this, it was made clear to me that if I agreed to go back, and it wasn't even back to earth, if I agreed to go back, I'd be restored to wholeness. I was like, good to know. I'm out of here. And I got to that door and I put my right hand up to push through the door. The door was closed. I was like, that door ought to be open. I put my right hand up to push through the door. Pretty fascinated by the fact, right-handed on earth, right-handed in heaven. I thought, wow. And I didn't even see my hand. Oh, I just remember lifting it, deciding, yeah, I got to get through that door. And I paused and I asked the angel, I said, is this the divine will for my life? And I only got to, is this the divine? And the answer was, again, immediate. And the answer was no. This is not the divine will for your life. Because I was going to say, is this the divine will for my life that a medical mistake take me out? Because I had always relied on spiritual healing. And this was my first journey into the world of medicine. I found it, even in heaven, I found it really funny that my first time I go to a hospital for anything other than birthing a baby, and they're like, oops. So I asked, is this the divine will for my life that a medical mistake take me out? And the answer was immediate. It was no. But I was told, whatever you decide, if you decide to go back or decide to go forward, you go with all of God's grace and love and mercy and care and blessings. And I thought, I'll take that deal. And that was the answer to my second prayer, no more hard decisions. And I was also told that that when we're striving to do God's will, there isn't a wrong decision. That even if we make a wrong decision and we may take the long way around the barn, we're going to end up right where we need to be. That if our motives are pure and we're trying to do right and we're trying to be a blessing, we're not going to go too far afield. And that was so comforting. So I thought, okay, sweet deal, I'll take the door because I really wanted out. I had such a clarity of memory of every crappy thing that had happened to me in the preceding 29 months. Being ostracized by so-called friends, being hurt by people's inane comments. I mean, a year after my husband's suicide, my phone lit up with a text, and I was very excited. I thought, oh, I have a text. Somebody's calling to check on me. Somebody wants to know how Rosemary is. And the text said simply, did your husband kill himself because you were cheating on him? And I was like, golly. And, it's like, have you stopped beating your wife? There's no answer to that. And the answer was no. And what I did was I deleted the message and I blocked the person. But there's no way to answer that. And I had not. I had not done anything like that. But even if I had, there are a lot of women I've encountered since then who made some mistakes and misjudgments in life, and then their husband offs themselves. It's still not their fault. It's still not because of them. And I hate that people think that. And, a brief aside, I went to a suicide bereavement support group. And, I thought, okay, well, this is kind of going okay. And this woman about my age stands up and says, my son would still be alive if he hadn't married that bitch. I was like, whoa. So we're still blaming the spouse. We're still blaming the woman because a man takes his life. But anyway, I wanted
before you
out.
go on, I want to, if I could give you a standing ovation right now, I would give you a standing ovation for saying those words, because how many people did you just release with that statement?
Oh, I hope a lot.
I hope a
I hope
lot
a
too.
lot because
And
it's true.
if you didn't hear that, rewind this right here and go back and listen to that again.
Well, it's true. It's for men and women both. Sometimes when marriages end, a troubled partner will end their life. And it's again, it goes back. I cling to this still a lot. There's nothing I could have done to make him kill himself, and there's nothing I could have done to stop him. I just don't have that power. And this suicide support stuff that we see all over social media, it is unmitigated BS. If you're feeling suicidal, reach out. I'll talk to you. I'd rather have tea with you at 2 a.m. or coffee or whatever than have to go to your funeral the next day. Really? What does that say to spouses? What does that say to mothers? What does that say to the people who did everything they could for their loved one and their loved one still kills themselves? It says that we weren't enough. And I know I did everything I could to be present and gracious and loving to my husband. But that whole thing of social media, reach out and talk to somebody if you're feeling suicidal, it is such a slap down to those of us who have lost someone. Such an unnecessary slap down. Anyway, so in heaven, I'm remembering how hard those last 29 months had been, and I thought, yeah, I'm done. I'm out of here. And then I had a vision. I had a vision of the nurse who had been so kind to me when I was on that gurney in that little ER where I had been transported after the surgery. I was pretty messed up in the head because I'd had so much blood loss. And this very motherly nurse had leaned over the gurney while they're trying to figure out what to do with me while I was still conscious. And I said, promise me you're not going to let me die. You know, one of the side effects of bleeding to death, or maybe it's not a side effect, is anxiety. The brain consumes 70% of the body's oxygen. Isn't that fascinating? So when you start suffering catastrophic blood loss, you really do lose the ability to make intelligent conversation and sound decisions. So this nurse had said, we have many solutions for this. I promise you, I'm not going to let you die. I thought, okay, she seems to know what she's talking about. So at that door, I'm given a vision of this nurse, the same nurse. She's sitting in a hospital supply room alone, surrounded by medical supplies and linens and stuff. And she's sitting on a little metal stool, leaning forward, head in her hands and sobbing uncontrollably. And I'm a witness to this. This was more than a vision. This was a potential future event that I am watching as a silent observer. And she is sobbing. And through tears, I hear her say, I promised that woman I wasn't going to lose her. I promised that woman I wasn't going to let her die, and I lost her. And I thought, oh, come on. Come on. She's a nurse. She's my age. She's in her late 50s. She's lost patients before. I'm sure she'll get over this. You know, I want to go. I don't want to go back. And then I was given another hit. And again, I'm looking at this woman sobbing, but now I feel the emotional angst of losing a patient. After promising me she wasn't going to let me die, I feel the guilt and grief and regret she's carrying in her soul. And I was like, God, don't do that to an empath. Please don't do that to me. And she did. The angel did. Anyway, I knew I had to go back. I put my right hand back at my side because I did think if I can spare somebody that much grief and angst and upset, I need to go back. So I put my right hand back at my side, and in an instant, I was back on that gurney. Just an instant, like less than a millisecond. And, you know, everyone's in the room. I had been alone in that room with my friend in that little ER cubicle. Now everybody's in the room. I had an IV in each elbow, had a party. And I do remember this. I remember one of the nurses was standing by my side with an IV bag, you know, the whatever, the little bag of fluid was on a IV pole. And I remember seeing this nurse just squeeze that bag as hard as she could because they were trying to make sure they got me back, I guess. But anyway, the nurse leaned over in my face and she said, what is your name, Rosemary? What year is it? 2018. Where are you? And I said, a crummy excuse for an ER. So,
Humor
because
is still
the fast,
intact.
yeah, because I actually shared this story with an anesthesiologist. I interviewed some people for my book. I want to make sure I get the medical perspective correct. And what this man started crying when I told him I had answered the 3 questions. And he said, you have no idea how relieved they were that they knew they had done the right thing in resuscitating you. Because there comes a point where you look at the time and you say, she's going to be brain damaged. She's going to be so compromised. And they stop. And the thing was, I was gone more than 10 minutes. And with bleeding to death, I learned they can't do CPR because it just pushes more blood out of the body. I interviewed an ER doc, and he said what they do is refill the tank. I guess it's right. Patch the leak, refill the tank, and restart the heart. That's the process they use. So to medical belief, I should be significantly compromised from having been oxygen deprived so long.
You know, you told a story about the morphine. You were the second person in 2 days who had an incident with morphine being the agent that took them out of their body. So hey,
It's
to
some good
those of you
stuff.
out there, like maybe you say yes to the morphine if you're wanting a near-death experience, or maybe you if you don't want to have to make the choice.
Yeah,
Well, thank you
it's
for
some good
sharing
stuff.
that. That was just an incredible story. I have lots of questions. So, can we start? I want to start with the angels.
Sure.
So I think people are always curious. You spent almost your entire time over there with that female angel who seemed like she may have been one of your guides. So I have several questions about the angels. So no, first of all, how did they physically appear to you?
Unfortunately, in terms of the floating in the blackness and the white room, I didn't see a presence. I just
Okay.
felt their presence. But after, when I was in the hospital, I was in the hospital for 4 days. When my friends would exit the hospital room, angels would surround my hospital bed and sing to me. And I did see them. And they were tall, over 6 feet, maybe about 7 feet tall, humanesque forms with head, shoulder, torso, but they were draped in gowns made of light, just sparkly, effervescent light. And they sang songs glorifying God. And the more they sang, the brighter they glowed. And
Hmm.
it was just spectacular. And I told them very distinctly, I'm not good with melody and tunes. I'm really good at houses. I can memorize houses, but not tunes and melodies. And they said, this isn't for you to remember. This is for your healing and your peace and your joy. This is a thank you for agreeing to come back because we know that life on earth is very hard.
Hmm. Well,
And
have you ever encountered music that sounded anything close to that since
yes,
you
I
did?
can't say the word antiphonal. I don't know how you say it.
We'll figure it out
Antiphonal.
and we'll put it down in the show notes because I think that that's something I want to share with people. Okay.
That's the close. I went to a cathedral. Are you familiar with basilicas, the Catholic cathedrals? Well,
No.
there's one in St. Louis. They're just these grand. I mean, the cathedral basilica took, I think it was 80 years to build. They're incredible structures. Sometimes the choir does this antiphonal singing, and it's just a very, almost a high pitched singing, and that's the closest I can describe to what I heard the angels do. I
Okay.
think it's pronounced antiphonal.
Okay. Well, we'll put that down for everybody. So these angels, they were speaking to you. Did you have a sense of what they were? We know the term archangels. So were they in that realm, or do you think this was an angel that was assigned to you as like a guide who's been with you before? What was your sense of who this angel was?
My impression was it was a cluster of them. It was like a troop of them. The one that was at the door, I guess, like when I was floating away in that blackness, it was like a bunch of them. And they were so glad to see me. They were just so happy to see me back. It was like when somebody goes away on a long trip and an arduous trip, but then they come back and you're like, oh, wow, here you are. We're so glad. But the one at the door, I guess, I don't know. It didn't feel like a familiar presence. I have often in my life felt the presence of angels on a human level, in this human experience. But it didn't feel like one of my people,
Okay.
like, a special soldier. I don't know. It didn't feel like somebody I had known before.
So they surrounded
That's
your
another
bed.
good question.
Thank you. They surrounded your bed and they were singing to you and healing you. And then have you had encounters since 2018 where you've been able to talk to them anymore?
I want to have them around me constantly, and one of my daily prayers is I want to learn how to just see them, just to see spiritual beings all the time, because life is still hard at times. It's still I
You're
just
still
feel like
human.
I know I still feel like that puzzle piece that doesn't quite fit. I was with a
Mm.
sick friend at the hospital, and this elderly pastor, the chaplain for the hospital came by, and she talked to my friend who wasn't feeling very well. And then she turned to me, she goes, the angels are telling me I have a message for you. I don't know what this is about, but I have a very important message for you. I'm like, let's hear it. And she said, you're still human. It's okay to be human. She said, do you know what this is about? And I said, yes. But she said it like 5 times. She said, you are still human. You're not hearing me. You are still a human being, and it's okay to be a human being. And I said, I don't have it, but I'll let it soak in for a while. And then I told her I'd had this NDE, and she goes, oh, that's what it's about. You're trying to be something you're not. You're still a human. You're not an angel. You're a human. And it's kind of an amazing experience, kind of really remarkable. And then the other thing, I was, my near death experience happened in September. And after that, I sold everything I had, not everything, but a lot of stuff, and moved to the Midwest. I wanted to watch corn grow. People laugh at that, but it's true. There are few things more beautiful than looking out at 200 acres of farm and watching things grow. And I feel strongly about that. Uh, and I guess it was about 6 months out that I started having profound stomach pain and profound problems with eating food and normal digestion and such. And it was so much so I had stopped eating because I was in so much abdominal pain all the time. And I thought maybe it was just some scars from the, 2 biopsies that were so kind of a big deal. And I went to this little church in this little tiny town in southern Illinois, and just this little nothing clapboard church. And I was just watching the ceremony, and it was a Presbyterian, no, it was a Methodist church, and they do this thing called bringing in the light at the beginning of the service, where they have somebody bring in a light, and then a candle on a stick, and then they use the candle to they use the flame to light the candles at the front. Well, so I see this little processional of, I guess, 3 people and the minister, and then behind them walks an angel. And this was I don't know if I've just seen too many statues in graveyards, but it had the metal mail, battle accoutrements on him, and the spear, and the, Roman looking helmet. I mean, he looked like an angry angel, a really do not mess with me kind of angel. And I watched this guy walking down the aisle of the church, an angel, and again, tall, over 6.5 feet tall. And I'm watching him, and I'm looking around the congregation like, does anyone else see this? I mean, I knew it was the angelic realm, but I thought, this is so obvious. And I looked at him, and he stopped by my pew, and he said, with great authority, he said, stop worrying about your stomach, your ego, your identity, and the rest of these petty fears, and write that book. And I was like, okay. And I had not
Did
even,
that seem like Archangel Michael to you?
or Gabriel, one of them. I have a little statue of one of those guys. I have a statue of Gabriel, but it's that very traditional look we have for fighting angels, angels clad in armor. And the other message I got was, surely the Lord is in this place and I knew it not. And I realized in my insides, this tremendous abdominal intestinal pain, that's what it meant. That God is even in that place. God is even there. And I was like, oh my gosh, surely the Lord is in this place and I knew it not. And with that, I felt something internally just kind of pop, and all the pain went away. And I was like, wow. And it was so profound to have all that pain. I had been suffering for days. In fact, I was going to go to an emergency room in another day if it hadn't gotten better. But it all went away in a second. And I have always remembered that. I remember what he looked like. I remember him coming into church, but that was his quote: was stop worrying about your ego, your pride, your stomach, and yourself, and go write that book. So isn't
That's
that
such a
wild?
great, yes, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. That's super, super neat. Um, you said in when you were in that place that you had a clarity of the last 29 months. Was that a life review of some sort?
I don't know, because I didn't see, panorama. I didn't see, things go by. I just, the biggest thing about dying, it was like waking up from a very intense dream and realizing that you got way too tangled up in the drama, that the dream is over, But that's what it felt like, was like, and I've said this in my book, it was like a child having a nightmare in a dark room and a heavenly parent grabbing the child by the shoulders and gently shaking them awake and saying, I know that was scary and I know it was bad, but it's over. You're awake now and I'm here with you. That's really what it felt like. That I had been so tangled up and he said this and she did this and this bad thing happened. And that was the clarity, was that it was like a dream. And people give me crap over quoting the Bible. People give me crap over everything. But in the story of Adam and Eve, it says the Lord caused a deep sleep to fall upon Adam, and it never says he woke up.
Well, a lot
But
of
that's
people who have near-death experiences say that this is the dream and that is the real. And having been on the other side myself, kind of feels like that to me as well.
it does. That's what it felt like. And even now I still get tangled up with drama over stupid stuff, and I have to really, sometimes it takes me a couple days to back up and say, wait a second, remember that. This is like a dream, and the angels are with us. But yeah, the whole thing of dying, it really did feel like a parent just shaking me awake and saying, yeah, that was bad, but it's over and
Yeah.
you're unhurt. You're
Wow.
okay.
You called this a divinely authorized event. So
I
do you
did.
think that you planned, your soul, your higher self, planned this in advance?
I've heard of those exit points. I've heard that theory. I Sounds reasonable to me. I recently met a man who's been, is going to be a big deal in my life for a while, and he's very he's very handsome. He's very interesting. He's just a really nice, decent man. And I look at him all the time and I think, how did I get somebody like you? Because he's really quite remarkable in many ways. But I really believe down to my toes. I just believe down to my toes that before we came to this earth, we were somewhere. We call it heaven. I can get behind calling it heaven. But I know down to my toes that he and I had an agreement that at the end, the last chapter of our life, we would say, hey, let's help each other. Let's help each other get, through these last 10 yards of life here. And I
Well,
know
that's
that.
interesting because that means that you had to be ready for each other because in a soul contract, they don't come together unless both have done the work to get there. So I'm going to ask you
Hmm.
a very unusual question, and I'm going to preface it by saying this first. I lost somebody so significant in my life. It took me 4 years to get over him, and I had not seen him for 3 years before he died. And in hindsight, now that he has sent me hundreds and hundreds of signs and he has been behind my artwork I created and my book that I created, and he definitely caused a different type of spiritual awakening that sent me on this path and trajectory of where I am today. And I look back at that
Mhm.
event as terrible and painful as it was, and I say, in some ways, that was the worst thing, but in some weird way, it was also one of the best things that has
Hmm.
happened to me. Can you at this point look back and say that about your experiences that have led you to where you are right now?
Yeah, I can. My husband's suicide, this sounds almost callous, but he needed to go. He needed to go for himself. And I guess I almost believe I agreed to this somewhere along the way. So that, I mean, I had been a writer for 30 years when this whole thing happened. And who better to talk about the intensity than some sensitive writer's sap? And I waited 7 years to meet this guy that is in my life now. And I just know down to my toes that we agreed to help each other through this last stretch of life. And yes, the work, oh my gosh, the work. It's just so easy when you're slapped down by trauma to just say, I'm just going to become that weird lady in the corner of the neighborhood that never takes in the mail, never answers the door, and lives off, Instacart. And I do love me some television, but yeah, that's the easy thing to do, is just to become that person. And honestly, that was my default.
Mm,
And even when you get to certain levels, like, deciding I'm going to just live in my car for a while, and then I can't, and then deciding I'll live with Tracy, and then deciding I have to live on my own, and then, I mean, it's all these levels, these steps that you got to claw your way up to.
right.
But what I have noticed is, uh, I haven't found a person traumatized that I can't speak to easily. And they say, "Oh, I've been through a trauma, you wouldn't understand." And I'd say, "Try. Tell me what's going on."
I really feel like you were specifically chosen to come and
Hmm.
help be a suicide, maybe protection advocate for people. Because look at all these people that have been put in your lives and in your path. And now I can't even imagine how many hundreds or thousands of people, if they don't even reach out to you, maybe are touched in some way by this. But it feels very, to me, divinely orchestrated that you were
Hmm.
chosen as the spokesperson for this because you do it so well. And it seems like you're bringing a lot of comfort to people. So thank you for what you're doing with that. I think it's beautiful.
I know that's true, but it just gets hard when you're doing it for the 57th time.
I'm curious. So tell me why you've wanted or felt compelled to tell this story 50 or 60 times. What about it makes you want to do that?
Uh, that's a really good question. That's a question nobody's asked me before. And I've been asked a lot of questions. I think it's because when people ask me to be on their podcast, and in the early days, I just said yes, 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 yes. And then subsequently, I became a little more selective about to whom I say yes. But I guess the bigger question is, why did I write the book? And I had a friend tell me, it was great advice. Even in the early days, as soon as I set up the website, temporarydeath.com, I started getting emails from people, and they all wanted to talk to me personally. People seem to think that I'm a lot further down the spiritual path than I am.
Is it it's kind of a heavy burden to carry. You know that you have information that has the potential to help a lot of people.
I do. And so, what my friend had told me months ago, he said, you can either email every single person who emails you asking for advice or guidance or help or a phone call. He said, or you can write a book. And he said, it's kind of like you can bake an apple pie for every single person who comes to you and says, I'd really like an apple pie. I really need an apple pie. Or you can hand out the recipe. And I thought that was a great analogy.
Yeah.
So I think that's why I've done all these podcasts. I know it's why I wrote the book. It took me 3 years. And it's also, writing is a highly disciplined form of thinking.
Mm.
And writing that book helped me do better with the podcast. And when you and I had talked the other day, and I was so grateful, I made a note of this in my little gratitude journal. But you
Aw.
had said that you saw a steady increase in the quality of my podcast, that I was getting more clear and more focused. And that really did make my day. And I look at it every day because it makes me happy.
Oh, that's
But I really appreciate that.
wonderful. Oh,
And
it makes me happy that I could do that for you.
oh, it was great. So I think writing the book helped me hone my thoughts. I had to think about how I wanted to say something, and then I'd write down how I wanted to say something. I thought, no, that's not quite right. And Mark Twain said the difference between the right word and almost the right word is the difference between a bolt of lightning and a lightning bug. So in writing the book, I had to learn how to pick the right word choices. And the other thing, when I wrote the first manuscript, I was still pretty angry at my husband. I had a lot of anger. I had a lot of upset. Despite being enlightened, I really had a lot of issues. And as I thought, do I want this out in the world in perpetuity? And I thought, no. And I had anger at some of his people. And I thought, do I want that out in the world in perpetuity? And I thought, no. So I kept taking the anger and the upset out of it until it really was honed down. I used to joke that by the time I was done editing my book, it was going to say, this bad thing happened, but then a good thing happened, and now everything's great. The end.
I love that. But you know what you did on a like an energetic level by writing all of that down. It's kind of that equivalent of, you know, how they would tell people write something down and then put it in a fire and burn it.
Oh,
You
yeah.
erased it, which is a release, and you let it go because otherwise
Hmm.
it's trapped in your body and that can cause all kinds of other problems.
That's true. That is what I did.
Oh my gosh. Well, Rosemary, this has just been delightful for me. I have loved listening to you. I could listen to you for a long time. And I know that there
Oh,
are going to
thank
be
you.
new people who want to connect with you. So I'll put your email down here because I know that you give that out in the show notes for people. Do you have any other way that people can connect with you? I know we've got your book. So
Yeah, my website is temporarydeath.com.
okay, perfect.
In fact, there's chapter one of my book is up at that website, so you
Oh,
can
so
read
somebody
it.
can preview it. Very nice.
Yep.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. I know it takes a lot and it takes a lot of energy to do it. And thank you for wanting to help other people in this world. You are absolutely helping to raise the collective consciousness, and I
Well,
thank
thank
you
you.
for that.
Well, thank you so much.
And thank you, everybody, for watching. Next up, check out this playlist of other NDE interviews. Please like and subscribe. It really helps this channel to grow so I can bring you more content. Thank you for watching. I'm so glad you're here.